The afternoon sun bathed Washington, D.C. in a soft glow. Karoline Leavitt, just 27 and already the youngest White House press secretary in history, was relaxing in her upscale apartment near the White House. The silver cross pinned to her navy blazer shimmered subtly, a quiet symbol of faith from her New Hampshire roots. Just as she stood to stretch, her phone rang. It was President Trump. "Caroline," he said, his voice sharp and urgent. "A religious case is happening at the D.C. local court. A Christian group is suing because they've been banned from praying in public. Get down there, watch everything, report back." There was no time to hesitate. Her apartment reflected her disciplined nature. Papers neatly arranged, suits prepped and pressed. Today she wore a modest outfit: white shirt, black slacks, navy blazer, and of course the cross. While she was used to crisis communication, this hit deeper. This wasn't just politics. It touched her personal faith. She climbed into her black SUV and weaved through the Capitol's packed streets. NPR buzzed on the radio, but she shut it off to concentrate. Something about this assignment felt heavier. Inside the courthouse, chaos reigned. Chatter, clattering keyboards, and murmuring voices filled the room. It was 2:53 p.m. The hearing on the public prayer ban, Trump's focus, was minutes away. Caroline found a seat in the center row and pulled out her phone to take notes. Under the stark courtroom lights, the cross on her collar gleamed, catching attention she didn't notice. Around her, people waited for their own minor hearings: parking tickets, landlord disputes. A man with a t-shirt reading "I am king" sat nearby, fidgeting with his phone. A woman in flashy jewelry whispered to her attorney. Clearly there was no dress code being enforced here. The judge's chamber door swung open. Judge Charles Hargrove entered, 62 years old, sharp-suited, hair slicked back, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He sat with deliberate authority, and the room hushed. "All rise!" barked James Wilson, the tall, no-nonsense bailiff. Caroline stood with the rest, phone still in hand. Hargrove's voice was cold and surgical. "This is a court of law, not a stage for self-expression." He sped through minor cases: parking fines, late payments, efficient but emotionless. When he spotted Caroline, he paused. His gaze narrowed, behind his glasses. "Miss Leavitt," he said, a chill in his tone. "That cross, it doesn't belong here. This is a neutral space, not for displaying faith." Caroline looked around. No sign prohibited religious symbols. "I'm Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary, observing a public case. This cross is personal, protected by the First Amendment." Hargrove's lips tightened. "This is not a church, Ms. Leavitt." He slammed his gavel. The room jumped. The bailiff looked uneasy. Even the court clerk, Mrs. Thompson, paused her typing. The man with the t-shirt and the woman in oversized jewelry exchanged confused glances. No one had commented on their outfits. Caroline stayed composed. "I'm not disrupting anything. If there's a specific court rule banning this, I'd like to see it." "You're challenging me?" Hargrove said, his voice rising. "I am the rule here." Another gavel slam. "You'll pay $500 for contempt of court." Gasps rippled across the room. "500? Just for a cross?" someone whispered. The judge leaned forward. "Maybe now you'll learn what respect looks like. This isn't a church, and you're not performing on a stage." Caroline didn't flinch. "Understood, sir. But why aren't others here, wearing slogans and jewelry, being fined too?" "Don't twist this," he snapped. "You're the only one flaunting a religious symbol in my courtroom." Now she was sure. This wasn't about order. It was about faith. He was targeting Christianity. The clerk's hands shook slightly, over the keys. She had rarely seen Hargrove this aggressive over something so small. The bailiff folded his arms, eyes narrowing. He'd seen this kind of bias before. Phones slipped into hands. The no-filming rule began to fade in the tension. Karoline stood steady, recording discreetly. "Are you finished, sir?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," Hargrove replied, voice sharp. "You'll pay. Sit down." She didn't. She approached the bench, eyes locked on his. "I'll pay," she said. "But we're not done here." Hargrove sneered. But this time, his confidence cracked. The courtroom stilled. Karoline stood tall. The cross on her collar burned like a silent protest. Hargrove had issued his ruling, but she had made her stand. Her voice was steady, calm, clear, and sharp as a blade. "Sir, before I take my seat, I need to clarify a few things for the record," Karoline said. Judge Hargrove frowned, caught off guard by her composure. "The record? You have no authority to demand anything here," he snapped, though his voice trembled as if he sensed what was coming. Karoline offered a faint smile. Not smug, just the quiet confidence of someone in command. She reached into her document bag and pulled out a gold-embossed card, raising it for the room to see. "I'm Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary, serving under President Donald Trump. What you may not realize, Judge Hargrove, is that I don't just speak for the administration. I understand the law, perhaps more deeply than you assume." Gasps echoed across the courtroom. The man in the "I am king" shirt gawked, while the woman with the oversized necklace leaned in to whisper to her attorney. Hargrove's hand froze mid-air, gavel in hand. "That doesn't change the fact that you violated my courtroom rules," he muttered, his voice faltering. But Karoline pressed forward, her voice resonating. "Your rules or your bias? I'm here on behalf of the president, observing a religious freedom case. A group of Christians is suing for their right to pray publicly. This cross," she gestured to the one on her neck, "represents my religious liberty, guaranteed by the First Amendment. You fined me for wearing it, but do you even know what the law says?" Hargrove tried to retort, his face tight. "I don't need you lecturing me. This is my courtroom." She cut in, stronger now. "You're mistaken. The law doesn't belong to you alone. Let me remind you of Church of Lukumi Babalu I versus City of Hialeah, 1993. The Supreme Court ruled that banning religious symbols without valid justification is unconstitutional. So tell me, do you have a justified reason? Or do you just not like the symbol I'm wearing?" The room fell silent. A few spectators covertly snapped photos despite court rules. Hargrove opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mrs. Thompson, the court clerk, hesitated, fingers hovering over her keyboard. Bailiff James Wilson nodded slightly. He'd seen countless proceedings, but never a reversal this swift. Karoline continued, her tone precise and practiced. "You fined me $500 for contempt, but I can prove selective enforcement. That man in the t-shirt violates the dress code. You said nothing. That woman's flashy jewelry, no issue. But my Christian cross? That's what earned your wrath. That's not law. That's discrimination." Hargrove's face shifted from red to ghostly pale. "You're slandering me," he stammered, sounding feeble. Karoline didn't pause. She held up her phone. "This entire interaction has been recorded. From the moment you called me forward. I've already alerted the White House office. If you want to fine me, go ahead. But this won't stop here." Gasps and whispers surged through the courtroom. Someone exclaimed, "She's right!" followed by quick applause before Wilson motioned, "For quiet." Hargrove panicked, reaching for control. "Miss Leavitt, I can rescind the fine. There's no need to escalate." He tapped the gavel weakly, voice trembling. But Karoline's gaze held firm. "No, sir. Rescinding it because of who I am only confirms your bias. The issue isn't about me. It's about how this courtroom is run. I'm formally requesting a review of all religious-related fines issued in the past 6 months, and I propose mandatory First Amendment training for you and your staff." The room erupted. An older man stood and clapped. A young woman whispered, "Who is she? Incredible!" Mrs. Thompson typed with urgency, eyes lit with awe. James Wilson gave a knowing smile. He'd always sensed she was different. Judge Hargrove collapsed into his chair, hands trembling on the gavel, staring at Karoline not as a defendant, but as a serious legal opponent. "You think I'm just a press secretary," she said, her voice low but fierce. "But I've stood beside President Trump through every lawsuit, election-related or policy-driven. I learned the law to protect him. Today, I'm using it to protect myself and others. You've made a serious mistake, Your Honor." She placed her White House ID on the bench and stepped back, eyes never leaving him. Hargrove tried to speak but found no words. He realized he wasn't just facing a savvy woman, he was facing a legal force. Scattered applause broke out again. Mrs. Thompson typed frantically to preserve every detail. Wilson stepped forward, respect clear in his expression. Karoline stood, tall. The cross on her blazer shone, not just a sign of her faith, but now a symbol of her triumph. She exited the D.C. courtroom, the late afternoon sun glinting off the silver cross on her navy collar. It was 3:30 p.m., but the energy inside felt like an explosion had just gone off. At the glass doors, she checked her phone. The recording had been successfully sent to the White House with a note to the president's advisor. "Judge, find me for my cross. Situation handled, awaiting next steps." This was no longer just a personal moment. It was now a national issue and a political opportunity. Inside, people still murmured. The older man leaned to his neighbor. "I've never seen a judge get taken down that fast." Mrs. Thompson printed the transcript, her hands shaking. Wilson left the courtroom, already calling a colleague. "You won't believe what just happened." By the time Karoline reached her car, her phone buzzed nonstop. On X, the hashtag #AshaCrossinCourt was trending. She opened the app and saw the first viral post. "Judge fines Trump's press secretary $500 for wearing a cross. She fights back with the Constitution, leaves him speechless." Cross in court. Hundreds of replies poured in within minutes. "Who is she? Unreal. Hargrove is done. Proof our system is biased against Christians." She smiled. The wave had only begun. At 4 p.m., President Trump weighed in. "Karoline Leavitt, my amazing spokesperson, just taught a leftist judge a lesson in religious freedom. Legal genius. We won't let them suppress faith." It garnered 50,000 retweets. In half an hour, conservative media jumped in. Headlines like, "WH Press Secretary Schools, Judge Over Religious Freedom, and Wins." Her phone rang. It was Trump's senior advisor. "That was brilliant. Get ready for a press statement. We're running with this." Meanwhile, Judge Hargrove sat alone behind his bench, ignoring the nonstop ringing of his phone. Reporters, judicial officials, even old friends tried to reach him. He gripped a cold coffee mug, staring blankly. "She's just a kid," he mumbled. "How did this happen?" But deep down, he knew. He'd collided with a force greater than himself. Back at the courthouse, Mrs. Thompson made a call she'd avoided for years. "I've worked with Hargrove for over a decade," she told a journalist. "He's always targeted religious people, especially Christians. That woman today, she was right. I've kept notes. I'm done staying quiet." She retrieved her notebook filled with case entries, crosses fined, hijabs flagged, while vulgar shirts and loud jewelry were ignored. James Wilson spoke up too. In the break room, he told colleagues, "I've seen Hargrove fine people for crosses at least 20 times. Rude shirts?" He laughs it off. Karoline just exposed what we all knew. A Channel 7 reporter went live outside the courthouse. Today, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt was fined $500 for wearing a cross. She pushed back, and the story is sweeping D.C. By 5 p.m., the hashtag hit 100,000 mentions. People shared their own Hargrove stories. One tweet read, "He fined me $200 for a prayer badge in 2023. Another said, "He scolded my mom over a necklace with a cross during a custody hearing." A clip from court, Karoline holding her White House card, her voice defiant, went viral, racking up over 1 million views in hours. She sat in her parked car, watching the momentum build. She called her husband, voice calm but thrilled. "Babe, I just shut down a judge. This is going to be huge." He chuckled. "You always pull off the impossible. Be safe." She smiled, hung up, and opened an email from the White House. "Prep for tonight's press conference. We're turning this into a win." At home, Judge Hargrove turned on the evening news. His own face stared back from the screen beneath the headline, "Judge faces backlash for fining press secretary over cross." He shut the TV off. The Judicial Council had called. They wanted answers by morning. His 30-year career now stood on shaky ground. All because of a 27-year-old woman and her tiny cross. "I didn't fight just for myself. I stood up for everyone who's been treated unfairly because of their beliefs." The press swarmed with questions, cameras rolling, but she answered each one with calm clarity, citing legal precedent and specific cases. Hargrove watched the press briefing on TV, his hands shaking. He switched off the screen, left in the dark, surrounded by the sound of silence and a flood of messages. His phone rang non-stop. Reporters calling, former colleagues distancing themselves. But what struck him hardest was hearing the testimony of Thompson and Wilson, people he had trusted for years. In disbelief, he opened his laptop and reread the Supreme Court ruling Karoline mentioned, Church of the Lukumi Babalu I. He exhaled, slowly. She was right. I was wrong. For the first time in 3 decades, Judge Hargrove felt humbled. He called the Judicial Council, his voice rough and low. "I'm stepping down. But I want to help make things right." The following day, Hargrove sat in a council meeting. No robe, no bench, just a man reckoning with himself. "I didn't recognize my own prejudice," he admitted, eyes red-rimmed. "Karoline Leavitt helped me see that. I want to join the training program so others don't repeat my mistakes." Linda, the lead investigator, made a note. His change of heart might prove useful. News of his resignation spread quickly, igniting debate. On X, formerly Twitter, some users mocked him, claiming he was faking remorse. But many praised his honesty. "At least he admitted it," one post read. "That's rare." Back at the White House, Karoline received an email from Linda. "Hargrove resigned. He's joining the training. You changed him." She smiled at her reflection, the cross around her neck now shining with renewed purpose. What started as a minor courtroom visit had become something far bigger. A movement. 4 days after the courthouse clash, the mood in Washington had shifted. Karoline stood in her office, gazing out at Pennsylvania Avenue, the silver cross still pinned to her navy blazer. Her phone lit up with messages. Trump allies, grassroots conservatives, everyday Americans, all thanking her for standing tall. A message from the D.C. Judicial Council came through. "Thank you, Miss Leavitt. A rapid investigation had led to sweeping reform." The council introduced new rules. Religious symbols could no longer be banned unless they caused an actual disruption. And every court staffer, from judges to clerks, was now required to undergo mandatory First Amendment training. Linda Martinez stood before the council, stating plainly, "The Hargrove case proves the need for more transparency. Training is just the beginning." A new plaque was installed at the courthouse entrance. "Religious freedom, a right beyond violation." On X, the hashtag #YourCrossingCourt continued trending. One headline read, "D.C. changes law after Karoline Leavitt's stand." Former Judge Hargrove attended the first training session, addressing dozens of court employees. "I believed I was impartial," he said, voice gravelly. "I was wrong." Karoline Leavitt taught me to question myself. Don't let your own bias guide your judgment. The room was still. Some nodded, visibly moved. Mrs. Thompson, now promoted to head of the court's transparency program, sat in the front, jotting notes. James Wilson led the training for courthouse bailiffs. "We are the eyes and ears of justice," he said. "When we see injustice, we must speak up." Karoline did, and we must too. Hargrove sat among them, knowing this was only a first step, but a necessary one. In her office, Karoline framed the $500 contempt fine. It hung on the wall, not as a souvenir, but as a reminder. One person can make a difference. Trump walked in, clapping her shoulder. "You're a star, Karoline. The religious liberty crowd loves you, and so do I." He laughed, his voice echoing. "We just won big. Now keep it going." She nodded, already preparing for her next speech at a conservative event in Virginia, where thousands waited to hear from the White House's rising legal star. But the ripple effects of that day extended beyond D.C. States like Texas, Florida, and Ohio began reviewing their own court policies. Texas's governor tweeted, "Thanks to Karoline Leavitt for reminding us of our religious rights. Texas will follow." A group of Florida attorneys filed to introduce similar training, citing Cross in Court as their inspiration. On X, users posted selfies wearing religious items, crosses, hijabs, Buddhist beads, captioned with, "My faith, my freedom." Karoline read them, feeling a deep sense of pride. She hadn't expected a single courtroom encounter to ignite a nationwide conversation. The next day, she took the stage in Virginia before 5,000 people waving banners that read, "Religious Liberty for All." "I only wanted to do my job," she told the crowd, her voice booming from the speakers. "But when a judge fined me for my faith, I couldn't stay quiet. This victory isn't just mine, it's all of ours." The crowd erupted. Some chanted, "Karoline for president!" She smiled, waving as cameras flashed. The cross at her neck shimmered, an image that soon went viral, described by journalists as the new symbol of American resilience. Back in Washington, Mrs. Thompson now oversaw a system of routine bias checks. Every fine was documented and reviewed monthly. James Wilson trained new bailiffs, repeating the message, "Don't fear speaking out." Karoline didn't, and neither should we. One evening, Karoline received a letter from Linda Martinez. "You didn't just change Hargrove. You changed the system. Thank you." Karoline set the letter down, glancing at the framed fine. She thought about the path that began with one unexpected courtroom clash and led to real reform. That night, Trump called again. "You're my gold, Karoline," he said. "The opposition's panicking, and we're winning." She laughed. "Thank you, Mr. President. I'm ready." She hung up, lightly touching the cross. Once just a small accessory, it now lit the road ahead. Not just for her, but for countless others. 3 months later, Karoline stood behind the White House press podium. Camera flashes lit the room. Reporters, influencers, and faith leaders sat before her, waiting. 3 months ago, she began, "I just wanted to do my job. But when I was fined for my faith, I stood up. Not just for me, but for everyone. Of you." That evening, Karoline received a message from a young law student. "I was scared to speak up, but your case gave me courage. I'm starting a legal clinic for people facing faith-based discrimination. Thank you." She read it by her mirror, a soft smile on her lips. She had inspired the next wave of defenders. At that very moment, Charles Hargrove stood before another training group. "I once failed," he confessed, "but Karoline showed me justice can't coexist with bias." Thompson and Wilson continued their work, ensuring the system remained accountable. Later that night, Trump called once more. "You're my warrior. Keep pushing." She nodded over. The phone, the weight of responsibility now familiar, but welcome. Karoline stepped onto the White House balcony. The sun was setting over D.C. She held the silver cross in her hand, not just as a keepsake, but as the spark that lit a fire. "Freedom isn't free," she whispered. "It takes fighters." A new message came in. The Judicial Council had asked her to lead a national reform task force. She smiled. She was ready. From a single courtroom conflict, she had changed laws, inspired hope, and reminded America of one unshakable truth. One person, one belief, can shake the world.